Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. Welcome to today's meeting, and I got to tell you, you people, whether you know it or not, you got Lions fever. 500 of you at today's DEC meeting. Give yourself a round of applause. 91 years of incredible speakers and networking, and that tradition continues today. I especially want to welcome our DEC members. If you're not a DEC member yet, just give me 10 seconds to convince you. Your next job, prospect, client, maybe even best friend is right here in this room. So if you want to build your network, we invite you to invest in you and join today. You can sign up on our website. And if you want to do that today, before you leave, we'll give you a free event ticket. If that interests you, you can stop by a registration on the way to lunch. As we get started, I would just ask you to kindly silence your cell phone so we don't disturb today's program. And if you've been with us before, you know we always begin with a pledge and a prayer, so please stand and join me as we honor our country with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is to your left. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by our very good friend, Father John McKenzie from Christ the King Catholic Church in Detroit. Father?
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. You want to bow your heads? Gracious and loving God, we come before you with hearts full of gratitude during this Easter season and for the city we call home. A city resilient, diverse, and ever rising from the ashes. We ask you to bless the work of the Detroit Economic Club and all gathered here today, that their efforts may continue to foster opportunity, justice, and unity for every person within our community. We lift up prayers for all who are sick and suffering, known and unknown, that your comfort and healing may surround them. We also remember with solemn hearts the passing of Pope Francis, someone I had a chance to meet many times, shepherd of peace and advocate for the poor. May his soul rest in your eternal embrace, and may his legacy of compassion live on in each and every one of us. And Lord, finally, because we are in Detroit, we humbly ask your blessing on our Lions this season. May they play with heart, strength, and integrity, win or lose, but we pray, Lord, as you know me, today that they win big time this coming season, all the way to the Super Bowl. May their sportsmanship on and off field reflect the very best of who we are, an example of goodness, unity, and perseverance, an example that we can do just about anything and against all odds. In your holy name we pray, amen. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Father. Best shoe game in town right there from any clergy. Best shoe game. Black Nikes. Check them out at lunch. All right, a couple of special thank yous. Thanks to WJR who's doing their Focus Show live from the lunchroom. You'll see them in a little bit. Thanks to WDIV Local 4 and Detroit PBS for live streaming today's meeting. And two people on my DEC team I want to give a special shout out to. You're going to see their handiwork on the screen today, and that's Amy and Matt. Thanks for all your hard work getting all of our videos and audience polls ready. So, all right, students are here today and always courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors. Their morning already included a private reception with our panelists. Let me tell you who's with us. Just hold your applause, please. We've got the Shamrocks from Catholic Central, thanks to Beth and WTW. Dryden High School Cardinals, thanks to Huntington Bank. Hazel Park Vikings, thanks to GM. Lake Orion Dragons, thanks to Satish Bank of Ann Arbor. And the University of Windsor, sorry guys, I forgot to get your mascot. Thanks to Jeff and Flagstar Bank. Give these guys a round of applause for being with us and thanking their sponsors. All right, a couple things. I always want to say thank you to our corporate sponsors and partners. Make no mistake, we would not be here if it wasn't for their generosity. So thank you if you're one of those organizations. If you want to get involved, see me at lunch, see anybody on my team at lunch. We'd be happy to talk you through some amazing benefits for doing so. Next up on our schedule, May 6th, we've got a couple of the Grand Prix drivers along with Bud Denker. We'll be celebrating the second year where the Grand Prix has moved to Detroit. We've got a couple of good ones coming up in June. We'll be making those announcements very soon. Want to also let you know, Detroit Free Press and Dave Birkett, who you'll see up here, have published a couple of Detroit Lions books. We're going to give away 3 books at the end of the program. If you're not one of those winners, you can purchase one on your way to lunch. So thanks to Dave and the Detroit Free Press. And finally, we want you to be engaged in the program using your phone. You can take lots of pictures, share with your social media networks, #EconClub. And our presiding officer, Terry Rhadigan, is going to prompt you to scan a QR code, which you'll see on the screen for some audience participation fun. So let's put Terry to work. Terry Rhadigan is the chair of the Detroit Sports Organizing Corp. They are the amazing team that bring major sports events to Detroit, like last year's NFL Draft and the 2027 Final Four. Terry is a DEC board member, an amazing supporter of the organization, and a great friend to me personally. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Terry Rhadigan.
Thank you, Steve. Wow, what a great crowd we have today. Welcome, DEC board members, guests, delighted to have you here. We are so excited for the 2025 Detroit Lions season and for another fun DEC meeting today. Not only will you hear from our 2 panels, but we are going to hear from you during the interactive polls that Steve just mentioned. But first, 1 year ago, we were all here with the same panel of experts, by the way, just before the NFL Draft was to be in Detroit. And you could feel the anticipation in this room, and man, did our city come and rise to the occasion. Together, we set a record of over 750,000 people downtown for the 3-day event. So let's turn our attention to the screen for a look back at that magnificent weekend. Gives me chills. It's hard to believe it was a year ago, actually. Okay, so let's get started with today's program. I want to introduce our first panel. Rod Wood is the president and CEO of the Detroit Lions. Rod, along with owner Sheila Hamp, has established a leadership vision for the Lions that continues to deliver results. Brad Galli is our moderator today, and he is the sports director at WXYZ Channel 7 TV. Brad has won multiple awards, including an Emmy, and does an amazing job covering all types of sports in our town. You can watch him anchor sports on 7 News Detroit at 5, 6, and 11. Please give a warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Rod Wood and Brad Galli.
Look, if you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment.
Have you ever been introduced with Eminem as your walkout music?
It's my chosen walk-up.
Understood.
music.
That's how it happened.
Anybody in Detroit, that better be their tune.
Thank you for being here with us today and doing this again.
It's great. A lot of familiar faces out there.
Yeah. I think so many of the familiar faces had a huge hand in bringing the NFL draft to Detroit and executing the NFL draft to Detroit. You had a huge hand in it. Let's stop down and just give a round of applause to everybody here today for what an amazing event this city hosted, the amazing people behind it, the volunteers, everybody, and the vision that was just cited as Terry introduced you, Rod. As you look back at the draft, the whirlwind to get it and the execution of it, what do you smile upon most fondly?
Well, it was a great weekend. It seems like forever ago. Sometimes you watch the film, it brings back great memories. I knew that we would put on a great show for the whole country, and we kind of exceeded everybody's expectations, including mine, with the people that showed up. And even on Saturday, which is kind of a less interesting part of the draft, rounds 4 through 7. I don't know if people remember, it rained in the morning, and we still had 250,000 people show up on Saturday. So the draft looked great on TV. Trying to get the NFL to consider bringing it back because I don't think they'll ever top it. So, and I told you off stage, there's no way Green Bay will come close.
In fact,
they'll finish second, or as I said to Brad off stage, third, like they did last year.
Hey-oh. Okay, there's a nugget in there. You've had conversations with the league to ask them to come back?
Well, I've mentioned to Roger, how could you ever do better than this? I mean, I think it's probably going to be a few years from now. A lot of cities are bidding on it. Green Bay has it this weekend. Pittsburgh has it next year. A lot of the cities that are unlikely to host a Super Bowl, this would be their Super Bowl opportunity. So it'll be competitive, but I know that when they reconsider Detroit, whenever that is, it's not going to be tough for the league to support bringing it back here.
It was awesome. So many memories made, so many young fans getting their first taste of football and a big event. There's a generation of football fans that's being introduced to the Lions, Rod, as a Super Bowl contender, and that's all they know. It includes my kids. They're 7 and 6, and all they know is the Lions are really good. They play on primetime. They can't stay up for the games, but for most of the people in this crowd, it's been an agonizing fanhood. As you look back at last season and all the success and everything that's built to it, do you pinch yourself sometimes to think about the journey that's gotten this organization to this point?
And that's a good word to put it. It is a journey. I mean, it's taken multiple years to get to this point. We're going into year 5 of the Brad and Dan regime. Started off, if people remember, 10-1 that first year, and there was the here we go again. But we knew we were on the right path. And then you turn it around the second year, 12-5, conference championship, 15-2, number 1 seed. It is a journey. Now, the only thing I can guarantee you is we cannot improve by 3 wins next year because there's only 17 games, so we can't win 18. But we've gone from 9 to 12 to 15, and I think have a foundation in place. We'll add some more players this week that we should be good for a long time. So hopefully your kids will only know the Lions is a great team. I've talked to other people who said the same thing, and it's nice to have that feeling. You see Lions stuff everywhere. I was in the airport yesterday. People are wearing Lions stuff, even in the off season. So it's great to be able to support the fans of the city the way we have, and see them pay it back by showing up and supporting us.
The reach of this team now, the stars, the jerseys that are worn in different countries, the international draw, the work that your team is doing to try to get in Germany, Canada, and really make a mark. The schedule is something that everyone's excited about seeing next month. Are there any tidbits, or can you lend your hand to any knowledge that we may see I'm sure a ton of more primetime games. Is there anything else you can reveal to us?
I wish I could. I talk to the league all the time with special requests about what we'd like, and they always say, oh, we'll do our best, and they never do. So I would expect that you'll see us on primetime a lot. We have a road schedule that's maybe as tough as anything, or at least on paper. You know, we play Baltimore, Kansas City, Philadelphia, Washington, Cincinnati, the 3 division opponents, the Rams, and Matthew Stafford on the road. I'm hoping that not every road game is primetime because that's tough on the team to fly back after a night game. We have a good home schedule too, including the Cowboys, which is a big draw on TV. So I think we'll get the maximum number assigned to us, and who knows, get flexed into maybe another one later in the season. If you like Sunday 1 o'clock games, you're going to be very disappointed because there's not going to be a lot of those. I think we'll be playing 4:25 kickoffs on national TV, which we were the #1 team on every broadcast network last year.
It's wild.
And the Amazon game on Thursday night after Thanksgiving when we played the Packers drew 5 million people more than the next highest Amazon game. And our Sunday night game against the Vikings, the last game of the year, was the #1 game on NBC for, I think it was 21 years since they had that kind of rating. So TV likes us, the stars that we have. I think the way we play, our coach, makes us an appealing team, and I expect to see us a lot on primetime.
You've talked a little bit over the years about the team's facility being in Allen Park and being a little bit landlocked, opening up the doors like you have to so many more fans being at training camp. But you said at the owners' meetings, Allen Park will be the home for the foreseeable future. Is that indefinite? Is that stamped down? You'd like to be there for the long term?
For the long term. And so if you're in the real estate business, please don't email me, because every time I talk about it, I get a lot of people showing me real estate that we could buy. But we're going to stay there for the next, foreseeable future. We just announced a partnership last year with Myers to name the facility, put a lot of money last year into the training room, this year a lot of money in the locker room, the weight room. So we've modernized the facility, I think, to be good for the foreseeable future. The location is hard to beat. It's easy to get to and from the airport, to and from downtown, to and from where most of our staff lives. So it's hard to beat the location. So right now, that's our home.
It's awesome, because what you've done is expanded it and made it a home for people at training camp and to wear those jerseys, to see those jerseys, these people that Brad Holmes has drafted and the staff has drafted to become stars. I don't know if today or right now is the moment, but I don't know how close you guys are to finishing the press release on the Aiden Hutchinson extension. Do you want to give us a taste of when that's coming? Days, months, weeks?
No comment. He will be here for the long haul, I can assure you of that. But we'll start working on that. He's going into his 4th year, which makes him eligible for an extension. And we have a track record of extending our own players, which we've done that recently with Sewell and St. Brown and McNeil. And I think that Hutch is likely to be coming up soon. We've got Kirby Joseph, who's also due for an extension. And that's going to be the challenge, is we built this great foundation of players, and we've benefited with many of them being on rookie contracts, and now they're all becoming second contract players, which you have to plan for. And we've been doing that really for the last 3 years. So we're ready to keep all these guys here for the long haul and keep this foundation in place and keep building, as I said, with more players picked this week.
You and Brad Holmes have both spoken about it. Dan spoke about it. It's getting big-time free agents in the NFL and adding it to a young core that's starting to really get paid. It looks cool on paper from a fan's perspective, but realistically, it's not there. So when people look at free agency, you made the point, if Derek Barnes signs with another team, he's a headlining signing this offseason. If Levi Onwuzurike signs with another team, that team saying, we signed Levi. How much pride was there inside the building to keep some of those guys this year?
Well, that's, we focused on keeping our own guys. First of all, we know our players better than anybody else does. And, they're part of our program. They're part of our foundation. And so we pursued our own players. When we put our free agency plan together, it started with how can we sign this guy, who's on our team, not guys that are not on our team, but you poach from somebody else, including Carlton Davis. We made a run to keep Carlton here, and unfortunately that didn't work, but we replaced him with Reed from the Jets. So it was kind of a 1-for-1. But other than that, we were focused on keeping our own guys and keeping money available to deal with Hutch and to deal with Kirby in the future.
So many questions about the roster, but some of the biggest changes going into next year will be that coaching staff. What did you see in Dan Campbell this offseason as he started to rebuild his coaching staff?
It was a really interesting process. I've never seen a staff lose so many coaches. We lost both coordinators. Both of them took a few guys with them. We lost our defensive line coach to the Patriots to be a defensive coordinator there. So I think it was 9 coaches in total that we had to replace. And so it went from a lot of stability to a lot of change. And I think Dan did it the right way. He stepped back. He was patient. He interviewed a lot of people for each of the positions. We thought we had an internal candidate to succeed AG, and we promoted 𝗣𝗲𝗲𝗶𝗲𝗿. We went outside for our offensive coordinator and Johnny Morton, but we knew him, so it was a little bit of a familiar hiring. And then we added a lot of guys to the staff that are younger, hungrier, and I think it's going to be a great staff. And I think the loss of AG and Ben is significant, but not nearly as significant as some of the press has made it out to be. We still have Dan Campbell, and that's the most important coach. And I can tell you, everybody wants to work for Dan Campbell. I mean, one of the guys that we added was David Shaw, who's a legendary coach at Stanford, I think 3-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year. He's been pursued as a head coach in the NFL, and he came here to work for Dan Campbell. So as long as we have Dan, we're going to have a great staff, and as long as Dan's going to be as thoughtful as he has been in hiring people, we're going to continue to improve and upgrade the staff. And I think when we get on the field, people are going to be excited to see the new coaches.
Are you ever tempted to tell Dan, listen, I'm the president, I'd like to work out with you and really get jacked, or maybe have some coffee with you and really get wired to start the day? Really live the Dan Campbell way?
I've told Dan I'm the president, but that's where it ends. I don't even know if he works out. I think he's just like made that way. Because I've never seen him work out, candidly. He's just a big, specially blessed, person, and with his physique and, coffee, I can't keep up with him, even though I drink more than I probably should, but he drinks more than anybody should. And he's wired the whole time, which is great.
Awesome stuff. One final message that you would have today to everybody in the room, to Lions fans, as you enter the draft just about 72 hours away and enter the 2025 league year.
Well, we'll add some good players over the week. We don't know who they are yet. We're getting used to picking late, which is kind of fun. So last year we picked 29th. This year we're picking 28th. We've done all kinds of game planning to get ready. Whatever happens, we'll be ready for every event. We're going to add good players, and we're bringing back pretty much the entire team. So when you return a 15-2 team and you bring back a bunch of guys that were injured, we ended up with 18 guys on IR at the end of the year, which is just crazy. So we're going to get better just because of health, hopefully, and looking forward to a great upcoming season and our 3rd division championship in a row, hopefully, and back at a home playoff game, and we'll see what happens after that.
Well said. Rod Wood, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you. Terry, you coming out to introduce our esteemed panel? Look, here he is. This is Terry. I get to introduce him. Thanks, Rod.
Thank you, Rod. Good luck at the draft, as if he needs good luck. Okay, so let's move on to our second panel. We're going to focus really on the Lions and the draft. And for that, we've tapped some of the very best experts in town who cover the Lions and cover the NFL. Dave Birkett is a 3-time Emmy winner for the Detroit Free Press. He's the Lions beat writer. He's covered the Lions for many years, and his articles and his insights are must-read for any Lions fan. Nick Baumgardner is a senior writer and the NFL draft analyst for The Athletic. If you are a Lions fan or an NFL fan, you must follow Nick. And Will Burchfield is a sports writer for 97.1 The Ticket, and we have enjoyed watching him on Fox 2's Lions pregame and also on Sportsworks on Sunday night. So let's give another warm Detroit Economic Club welcome to Dave, Nick, and Will.
Was this your requested song, Will?
Not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted a little Eminem, but I can't supersede Rod Wood like that.
Davey, breaking news?
No,
It was just, Rod had a good line about Green Bay. I had to make sure the office knew.
Dave beat me to it.
Did you like my follow-up question? Did I do a good job?
Fantastic.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
great reporting.
We're all so excited to be back here. When Steve Gregorian invited us back to be here, I think the text messages were an instant yes, 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 yes from all of us. So thank you to Steve, the Detroit Economic Club, and to everybody for welcoming us back. This is the team we cover. It is really fun to cover this team the last few years. Being around the best football in America has been really special. Dave, I'll start with you. Free agency. We just heard Rod talk about it a little bit, the challenges this team had. How do you evaluate some of the moves this team made?
Yeah, look, I thought Brad had a great line at the owners' meetings a couple weeks ago, sort of comparing what the Lions did to planning a household budget, right? You have to take care of the mortgage, you put some money away for the kids' college fund, and then maybe you can splurge on a vacation if you have anything left. And the Lions didn't this year because they have bigger goals. They have other things they're planning for. And so wasn't a big surprise what they did or didn't do. I think DJ Reed was a really good addition. He fits what they want to be on defense. He's a really good player. Sort of a one-for-one trade, as Rod said, with losing Carlton Davis. Ultimately, this team is going to get better if they're going to get better from within. It's going to be Aiden Hutchinson coming back and Aleem McNeil when he gets healthy, and some of the young guys taking another step forward, Terrion Arnold and maybe even Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporte of that group. So I wouldn't be, the Lions might not win 15 games again, but I'm not down on their prospects at all for 2025.
Nick?
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I mean, I think that when you look at how they've drafted, I just did a thing on The Athletic, it's up now, ranking teams 1 through 32 on how they performed in the draft the last 5 years, and the Lions are number 1 by like a bit. I mean, it's been, if you go back and you look at some of these classes, they've just drafted so well that you can't afford to spend on anything outside of, what you already have, and I think that that's kind of the envy of the league. You look at teams like Baltimore, who do this all the time. Kansas City actually does a really good job of this too. They build their team through the draft. They pay their own players. And like Rod said, they know them better than, the alternative. So everything they've done the last 5 years here, or 4.5, whatever it's been, is about like a blueprint and how to build a team from the ground up. It's kind of crazy to say that, but that's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to hear Rod Wood talk about and pretty much guarantee a third straight NFC North title, that we live in this reality, which still feels sort of upside down here in Detroit. But I'll echo what these guys said. I don't think the Lions necessarily got better in free agency. I think Reed is at best as good of a player as Carlton Davis, and they obviously lost Kevin Zeitler, and they have to replace him likely in the draft. But I also don't think they needed to get better in free agency. I think they view free agency as sort of caulk for the roster, and you can plug holes with caulk, and they look at the draft as the place where they reinforce and strengthen the foundation. They will get better in the draft, and that will make them a better team next year. And they have a really hard schedule next year. They're playing 7 or 8 of the best quarterbacks and maybe best teams in football, all of them on the road. So they do need the reinforcements in the draft, and I think the offensive line is one really critical area they have to reinforce this Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
That leads us into Terry rejoining us here. We're going to involve everybody in the audience with a poll. Terry.
All right, thanks, Brad. We've talked a little bit about free agency, so now it's your turn. Using your phone to scan the QR code on the screen and answer this question: what are the largest Lions draft needs? And for this one, you'll be able to select 1 or 2 choices. What are the Lions draft needs? What do you guys think?
We're not going to say prospect names yet. We're going to stick to just the needs on this roster. We will get into the prospects next. Let's kick it back over to you, Will, if you want to start things off here.
I mean, it's no surprise defensive line jumps out to an early lead here, and edge rusher is probably what most people are thinking of. And, they brought back Marcus Davenport. I don't think they can reliably expect him to play a full season or even 10-plus games next year. And it's also not just a short-term need, but a long-term need. They need to find someone that can be a reliable weapon opposite Aiden Hutchinson. And they do have some versatile pieces at linebacker and Derek Barnes who can help boost that pass rush, and Levi Onwuzurike, Josh Pascal can kind of pick out kick outside from the inside. But to me, they need to come out of at least day 1 or day 2 of the draft with a potential impact edge rusher. It doesn't have to be a defensive end. It can be more of an outside linebacker, maybe someone who's a versatile piece. I think 𝗬𝗲𝗀𝗵𝗿 would play with 11 linebackers at once if they let him and just deploy them in a multitude of ways. But to me, defensive line stands out for the right reasons so far on this poll.
Nick, at Brad Holmes' press conference the other day, edge rusher questions were asked, and he goes, "Is this all because Aiden got hurt? You guys are all just wanting another one?" But I think just the idea of another top edge rusher opposite Aiden entices this fan base so much. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think if you look at it, you say to yourself, and Holmes has touched on this too, Aiden is one of the 5 best pass rushers in the NFL, and he'll be paid like that, and he'll be here. The way I look at it is, you go into this draft, they have a chance to maybe even get 2 edges. This draft is deep enough. And for me, if you keep the other guy opposite Aiden, or if it's a couple, young and hungry and on rookie deals like that, that's what you do. So I think they just need more, guys that can free up Aiden. I would also add that wide receiver is a sneaky one at the bottom there. There's not a ton of depth there anyway. And if you look at, one guy Rod didn't mention was Jameson Williams on an extension. So we'll see about Jameson. And the other thing that they've talked about a ton on their right is that the receiver deals are so expensive that it's really, really hard to make those. They've already paid Amon-Ra, so I could see them attacking that maybe even higher than some think.
Dave, you want to hit on O-line?
Yeah, first I want to see who raised their hand for quarterback, because after defensive line, the quarterback was the next one that popped up there. And maybe, back up if you don't like Hendon Hooker, I guess. But defensive line, obviously, number one. One position that doesn't show up on there is safety. They do not have any depth behind Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. Certainly expect them to get a deal done with Kirby. And we'll see. I would guess Brian would be in line for 1 too, but it's tough to pay 2 safeties, $20+ million a year. Receiver, you mentioned that with, there are 3 teams right now that have 2 receivers making more than $25 million, and it's the Eagles, who just won a championship. The Bengals just did it, and I'm losing track of who the third one was. But that's a tough position to pay. So I do think the Lions add some depth there. Right now, Amon-Ra is the only contributing receiver under contract beyond this year. So I think defensive line is obviously what they have to hit early, perhaps with 2 players, but I'd look for them to add a receiver at some point in the draft.
Can I give you a wild card potential need in this draft? And I don't really consider this a need as the roster is currently assembled, but it would not shock me if they took a tight end on day 2 of this draft. And let me be unequivocal about this. They love Sam Laporta. I love Sam Laporta. Everyone loves Sam Laporta. He is Air Bud in the NFL. Like, he really is a golden retriever who also is a hell of a tight end. I just wonder if the Lions look at Sam Laporta's rookie season as his ceiling in production in the NFL. And if that's the case, and they begin to map out how they attack tight end long term, if it makes sense to draft a younger and likely cheaper player this year. They've drafted so well for 3.5, 4 years now that they can't reasonably re-sign all of their best players. And when Laporta is due a contract in a couple of years, the top tight ends might be making $20 million per year, and someone among this crop of players is going to be left out by the math. And Brad Holmes always talks about they view draft picks as future investments. I don't foresee them drafting Sam Laporta's replacement for this year or even next year, but they could add that guy, maybe someone like Harold Fannin Jr., the Bowling Green kid who led the country in receptions and yards this past season, as a replacement for Laporta 2 or 3 years down the line. I just, with the way they are proactive and forward thinking, it wouldn't surprise me to see them draft some positions which currently seem very stable, like safety as well, but down the line they might have a need for.
So just to add to that, Fannin was a guy that the Lions brought in on a pre-draft visit. You never want to read too much into that, but it's always interesting to note. And I will say, when Rod was talking in Florida a couple weeks ago at the owners' meetings, because we always try to parse what's being said and maybe read some things into it along with doing your own reporting on it. The people that he mentioned from the 2023 draft that they want to take care of when he was talking about future contracts were Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. He didn't mention Jack Campbell, and he didn't mention Brian Branch. And again, I wouldn't read into that they don't want to re-sign those players, but the 2 he specifically mentioned by name were Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. So I agree. They need another one. They have 2 solid ones on the the roster right now and a couple, guys that would contribute or compete for a backup job, but I think Sam will be here long term. Just my own read on it.
You look at the smoke screen sometimes and maybe think maybe he was instructed by Brad to say those two names and not the other two so that people don't know what they're doing for the draft. He's bought himself so much grace from this fan base, Brad Holmes, because of how well he's drafted. And we were at the press conference the other day, and our pal Eric Woodyard from ESPN points out in a question, hey, you've drafted 6 Pro Bowl players since you've arrived here, more than any other team in the span since Brad Holmes has arrived. Nick, we'll start with you with this. Draft prospects, where could the Lions go? What names are you looking at 28 or potentially in a possibility to move up?
Yeah, I think moving up or moving down is actually a chance here for both of them, or for them, because, I mean, this draft is a weird one. It's not super stacked like we've seen in years past. There's a lot of quarterback-needy teams still, so guys could, be on the fall like Terrion was last year, so I'll be on the lookout for that. But in terms of names, Donovan Iziraku from Boston College is a really seasoned pass rusher, really good kid. Will's a Boston College guy, so he'd love that one.
They're all great kids.
Yeah, and then the other one would be for me that stood out all the way is Gray Zabel, who's a tackle guard center. He would be a center guard in the NFL from North Dakota State. Zabel is one of my favorite players in this draft. At the Senior Bowl, he was a dominant player at a low level, but a guy who's also played all 5. He's an active farmer still right now. Runs a farm in the Dakotas. Will continue to do that while he's in the NFL. Like work ethic off the charts. And Iziraku is a similar thing. I mean, they're both great teammates, high football character. Both would fit in a position of need. So if either of them were able to fall to Detroit, I think that would be hard to say no.
Zabel reeks of a Lion.
Yeah,
Versatile, where they're at, can play guard,
crazy.
center, and oh, by the way, he has a farm.
He told me a story once when he was a sophomore, I think it was in high school. He'd never played center before. He was a tackle the whole season. They earned the state championship game, and it's halftime. The center had broken his hand. So the coach goes to Zabel, who's 14 years old, and is like, have you ever snapped before? He says, no. He says, okay, well, you got 10 minutes to figure it out. And he did, and then they won the state title, right? So he's a really, really smart player, and I think would fit everything they're doing here.
A prospect to watch from North Dakota State. Will, what kind of players do you have your eyes on other than your boy from Boston College?
Strictly BC guys. No, I think one guy that jumps out to me, who a lot of people here might be familiar with, as a Detroit native and ultimately a Michigan State kid who transferred to Oregon, is Derek Harmon, defensive tackle, who is probably more of a mid-first round pick, but there's a chance and a decent one that he's available at 28. Dave, when you and I and a few others talked to Daniel Jeremiah, who's an NFL draft expert last week and has a really good feel for how every team is viewing these prospects, I asked him, is there a chance that Harmon is on the board at 28, and if so, does he suit the Lions' play style? And he said, I think there's a legit shot that he's there. He views the floor for Harmon as either 28 with the Lions or 30 with the Bills. And he said the way that he plays is reflective of the way the Lions have built this roster under Campbell and Holmes. And it's not just the violence and the physicality, which certainly shows up on tape, but as Jeremiah said, it's the instincts and the awareness. And the Lions have hit home runs in the draft by drafting really high IQ football players, and that's exactly how Derek Harmon plays. One scout said he reminds him of a younger Cam Hayward, but bigger. And I'll remind you guys that Cam Hayward is a 4-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler who's closing in on 100 sacks. So that sounds pretty good to me. And if you could pair Derek Harmon with Alim McNeill, you're looking at eventually probably one of, if not the best defensive duos on the interior in the NFL. And the NFL continues to shift and place a premium on interior penetration. And Derek Harmon is certainly a guy who can generate it.
And Alim McNeill likely will miss a good chunk of the season, bouncing back from injury. So the interior D-line is a position to watch. A great homecoming potential for a Detroit story in Harmon. Dave, you have your eye on a Buckeye who is injured but could be an NFL starter for a decade.
Yeah, so just a little bit on how the sausage is made. You see the video floating up on the screen right there. I don't know if it was you or Terry or someone had sent us a text, sort of asking. We were talking about what players we had suggested. I think we all agreed that Iziraku was a guy that at 28 would be a big fit for the Lions. And so maybe we all had him on our list of video to pull. Josh Simmons is a guy that I mentioned. And look, I don't know that he's even going to be there at 28. I just... there are a lot of questions about where exactly he's going to go. He was he was considered one of the best offensive tackle prospects in the draft before he hurt his knee, torn patella tendon midway through the season for the Buckeyes there. And we talk about Brad Holmes and him just drafting the best available talent, well, if Josh Simmons is there, the Lions are in a position where they can afford to wait. They don't need him to play right away. That's maybe a guy that they can take, and that would help with their salary cap crunch because he could play left tackle down the road or right tackle, depending on what the Lions would like to do with their offensive line. I'm going to throw one other name out there, and I know we don't have video of him running, but it's a guy that I think fits the Lions. I had mocked him to the Lions very early on in my mocks. I think most draft nicks have him sort of a second-round talent now, but in this draft where there are so many players that will have similar grades, and if you're looking for a players and fits, Nick Scorton from Texas A&M is another defensive lineman, really. I think he has some position versatility there that would fit what the Lions want to do and is a really high-character guy as well. And so that's just sort of a dark horse name to keep an eye on.
A guy who made his bread at Purdue, then went to Texas A&M, production at both places. Terry, before we have you up here, can you linger for maybe another follow-up here? He likes wild cards. Did you have a follow-up or no?
Well, I'll just add 𝗣𝗲𝗀𝗃𝗏𝗏 to this list, and Dave, I know you had mentioned him in a story you wrote maybe a couple weeks ago.
Very similar to Simmons, yeah.
Yeah, similar to Simmons in that if he wasn't injured right now, he would almost certainly be a top 15, top 20 pick, but he had to have surgery on a torn labrum after the combine, and some of that might lead to him sliding, and if he is available at 28, he's a linebacker who could be deployed as a pass rusher in the NFL that has high-end traits across the board. And we know two things about Brad Holmes. He loves his Bama boys, and he isn't afraid to draft injured players, even early in the draft, which he has done multiple times between 𝗠𝗫𝗃𝗃, JMO, even Josh Paschal. So if 𝗣𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗃 is there, he's someone that would give 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗀𝗃 a really intriguing chess piece on defense.
Terry, take it away.
Well, great perspective, guys. Now it's your turn in the audience. You get to play General Manager Brad Holmes. Who are you picking in the first round? You can only pick one. And while we watch that and see if the audience agrees with you guys, why don't I throw it back to you, Brad?
Brad Holmes told us to get our popcorn ready for the draft. Stop trying to predict things. He said, when you go to the movies, I get it, you want to see the trailer, but you don't want to know everything that's going on. I also like making a living. I think you guys too. So it's our job to try to predict what Brad Holmes will do. Nick, where will they go in that first round?
It's hard to say. I almost feel like it's going to be about, what happens in front of them. I feel like this is going to be a really good opportunity for them to actually trade up even. If one of these, when Will's talking about Derek Harmon, I don't think Derek Harmon's going to be there in the 20s, but if Derek Harmon falls, just like with Terrion, I did not think he would fall as far as he did last year. But if he is falling and he's in the late teens or the early 20s, I think Rod said it when he was talking earlier, they don't have that many spots. It's not as important right now to just save all your picks. And while Holmes has done so good in the second and third rounds, if a premium talent like that, who they have as a top 13 or so player, is falling at 18 or 19, I could absolutely see them going up and getting him. They're a playoff team trying to win a Super Bowl. I feel like this is the time to max those things out. That's stuff that we see the Eagles do. I mentioned Baltimore earlier. Harmon would be almost like a perfect fit for everything they do. If they stay, then I like maybe 𝗍𝗍𝗀𝗃𝗏𝗃 or even 𝗣𝗲𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃.
Dave, we were asked to put together a list of notable players that the Lions likely wouldn't get, but maybe in the possibility of a trade-up could go get. This used to be, I hate to keep using this, but this used to be the Super Bowl for Lions fans. As soon as the season would end, or honestly, even when the season would still be going on, we would all turn the page to the draft. I remember doing stories. We would go on TV and say, the #1 Google search in Metro Detroit was NFL draft for the upcoming year. They don't need to trade up. They don't need to go get a guy, or as Nick said, maybe it's not going to benefit them. But if they do, who's a notable name up top that could really attract them and fit in well?
Were we asked to do that? I forgot about that, didn't we?
I don't know.
Maybe I didn't send the text back.
Pretend like it.
Yeah, look, it's I think it's defensive end because that's the position that they need most. And even though Brad downplays it and, hey, we're only doing this because we're talking about this because Aiden was hurt last year, right? Well, that's the position that they need the most help on. So I think it's a player like Shemar Stewart from Texas A&M. If that's a player that they have a really high grade on. He's another guy, oozes traits, ran 4.5, yeah, the combine at 275 pounds or whatever he was. I mean, he did not have the production at Texas A&M, 4.5 sacks over 3 years, but that's the type of player, and they brought him in on a visit that if you really like him, and he's a guy that slides into the early 20s because maybe there's just not enough, people aren't convicted enough about what he can be, then maybe that's the type of guy they go up and get. I think it's a positional thing more than that player.
I think Shamar Stewart is maybe the most polarizing defensive player in this draft, in that, as you referenced, athletically, he is one of the most gifted players to ever enter a draft. If you look at his relative athletic score, which has been tracked since, I think, the 1980s, he has, I think, the third highest RAS ever, and his score matches that of Myles Garrett's score. Only Myles Garrett had 32.5 sacks in 3 seasons at Texas A&M, and Shamar Stewart had 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons at Texas A&M. But the athleticism and the get-off and the explosiveness is irresistible, and I think some team is going to be enamored enough with all he brings as an athlete to take him in the top 20. I'll mention one thing Jeremiah told us on Friday, and he was talking about potential trade-up targets for the Lions, and he said, I think their quote-unquote dream scenario is that Jalen Walker, who is widely viewed as a top 10 pick, begins to slide out of the top 10 into the top 15 range because some teams view him as more of a tweener, and that he's not quite big enough to be a full-time defensive end, maybe not quite fluid enough or instinctive enough to be an off-ball linebacker. And I think where some teams view that as a liability, the Lions, who love versatility, view that as an asset. And Jalen Walker could be a really productive pass-rushing linebacker in the NFL. And if he's there, Jeremiah said, I think the Lions would make, or possibly make, an ultra aggressive move to go get him. So if he falls out of the top 10, a name worth keeping an eye on Thursday night.
Nick, I'm going to steer you a little bit this way.
Go ahead.
You're the draft man.
Yeah.
Year-round, you're covering the draft from top to bottom. How does this draft start? It's Cam Ward at 1, that's the expectation. And for a guy like that to slide to the Lions, we're watching video of some of just the top overall prospects in this draft. What's the order looking like, and how could a guy get bumped down to the Lions?
Well, what has to happen is these quarterbacks have to go way before they're supposed to go. And so Cam Ward is probably going to be number 1. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to go top 3, but I think that he certainly is in the conversation to go top 10, and he could go top 3. When you talk around the league, nobody really knows what the Giants are going to do. It's sort of up in the air. But you look at the Saints there, they need a quarterback. Pittsburgh needs a quarterback. They could go up and do it. There's a lot of teams. If Cleveland doesn't take a quarterback at 2, they obviously still need one. So there's a lot of that can still happen. And like another Georgia kid, 𝗍𝗲 Williams, is in the same type of boat. Like if he starts, and I don't think he's going to slide, because I think he's going to go way higher than people have mocked him, but it's the same kind of thing. He's a lot like Trayvon Walker. Hasn't played a lot, has been up and down, has been inconsistent, but he has all the traits. When we talk to people in the summer, 𝗍𝗲 Williams was like a top 3 player on this board. So there's just a lot of variance in this draft. There's not any consensus among teams on what does your top 12 look like. There's nothing after like 2 or 3, and even then it's all over the place. So I think this is going to be a year where people fall. Like locally, Will Johnson, I think, is probably going to fall, and Lions don't necessarily need a corner, but if like a guy like that starts sliding and they like it, I could see them making a move for it.
Nick mentioned 𝗍𝗲. That's the other name that popped into my head, because again, I think it's very, last year they wanted a cornerback, and not that again they were drafting for need, but they had Terrion in particular rated extremely highly, and when he was there, there was some talk about maybe it was Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman from Missouri, that they were going to go up and get because they liked him too. But they saw that ability to fill a need with a player that they liked, and so for me, it's 𝗍𝗍 and Shamar, and you can probably speak to this a little bit better, but that defensive end group, that pass rush group, defensive line group, really, first, there are so many good players, but second, there's so many guys with questions too. Right. Some of these guys that are maybe the most talented, Mike Green, James Pierce, have some off-field or football character type issues that you have to sort through. And even as Rocco, he's a team captain. There's no questions about him off the field or anything, but just from a positional standpoint in terms of how you use him because of the size, real long arms, but not the biggest. So, that's why I feel like a Stewart or a 𝗍𝗍 Williams, if the Lions trade up, or even come back to Nick Scorton, the guy that I mentioned, the big body that they like in that end opposite Aiden.
They've got the 4 NFC North logos up there for us, because the next point of our discussion is about the division. You may not all know these prospect names, but part of today is kind of giving you these guys' expertise on it, educating you so that when you talk to your friend from Chicago and the Lions are picking 28th, you tell them they just got a really good guy because Will Burchfield told me so.
Don't say that.
Well, a good character guy because he went to Boston College. Is that better?
College guy, yeah.
The outlook for this division, Will, it is going to be very competitive and likely for years to come. The Bears finished in last, but they've got Caleb Williams sitting there. I don't know if you want to break it down team by team or just want to start us off here with a thought on the NFC North this offseason.
It feels like two teams in the NFC North are trying to beat the Lions by emulating the Lions, and that's the Bears and the Vikings, who both loaded up on the offensive line this offseason. There's no doubt that the Lions have seized control of the North by mauling teams with their offensive line. That has been their best asset now for really 3-4 years running, and we saw the Bears make major moves to trade for Joe Thuney, to bring in Jonah Jackson, and there was a third interior offensive lineman they brought in too. We saw that the Vikings spend major money to raid the Colts offensive line and Drew Dahlman and Will Freeze. And when Ben Johnson spoke about the Bears additions, he said we wanted to add, I think, dirty, gritty, nasty football players on the offensive line, which is spoken like a coach who saw the value of that firsthand in Detroit. And so I think those two teams in particular are following a bit of the blueprint the Lions have laid out, at least on offense. And to further it, it would not surprise me to see the Bears take a running back in the first round to supercharge that offense, just like the Lions did with Jahmyr Gibbs. So again, in sort of this upside down world, we have the Bears and the Vikings trying to be like the Lions. And I think it's going to make for a lot of highly physical, highly intense clashes over the next several years.
Nick, the Packers were they the youngest team to ever make the playoffs last year?
It was close. I think
was
it
close.
might have been, yeah.
And they're still really young.
Yeah.
What's the draft outlook? What's the offseason outlook for the Packers?
I think it's, they're a little bit different than like Will's saying. I mean, they have their own identity with LaFleur and everything else. I think that they've done a nice job over the last few years without a ton of premium picks of maximizing everything. And that's just kind of what Green Bay does. So I feel like continue to build around Jordan Love, fill some holes defensively, especially on the front, because you're dealing with everything Detroit gives you from a run perspective. But really the thing here, this is the best division in the NFL, and I don't think it's particularly close. When you look at how the teams are run, too, like including Chicago, who's had their ups and downs, they've drafted very well. And Poles has had problems with free agency that I think they've talked about, but they've drafted very well. The Vikings are one of the best run teams and coach teams in football. Same thing with Green Bay forever, and we know everything Detroit's done. So the difference between every team is just razor thin. And, every game last year that you saw, even when they would play Chicago, they were competitive games and competitive moments. And if you saw Caleb at the end of the year compared to the beginning of the year, it was a different player. It looks like he's on his way. So I like the division a lot. I mean, I think Green Bay's on its way, too, to stay right there with Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay, and then Minnesota's got to figure out a quarterback. But really a lot of talent here.
Dave, when you do your game-by-game predictions, that road gauntlet is going to be tough to try to find automatic Lions wins or really confident Lions wins. But, man, these division games are going to be tough to pick, too.
No, you're right, and Nick said it. I mean, best division in football in my eyes. The one thing that I think all these teams are doing to a certain extent, and it ties in with that, the offensive line is building around their quarterbacks and trying to give their quarterbacks something. That's what they did in Chicago, right? They wanted to make sure they protected Caleb, and that's where the Ashton Genty pick would come in, beyond him being a phenomenal talent. I think you hit it in Green Bay. They haven't taken a receiver in the first round in 20-some years, but they got a bunch of pretty good receivers, right. and they always do a good job of supporting their quarterback with the offensive line. And we're going to see this year with the Vikings, it's going to be J.J. McCarthy's show. And so, he's got a good receiving core in place. T.J. Hawkinson obviously is there too, but maybe that's an area that the Vikings go to try to make sure that they give their young guy everything he needs to succeed as well. That's an older team, so, maybe they could add some youth on defense, but, when you're building around a young quarterback, that's the most important thing you can do is support that guy.
Lunch is just around the corner, but before we get there, Terry, you want to come out and launch our final poll of the day? It's a big one. You get to show off your prediction for the year.
I hate to interrupt that discussion. It was fascinating. Okay, so audience, we're back to you for your perspective for what's going to happen in the 2025 season for the Detroit Lions. What are your expectations? 2025 Detroit Lions. Brad, over to you.
Wow, what a surprise that jumps out right away.
I see a no playoff vote, though.
Whoa.
Oh, I didn't make the play. Okay.
Who let Ben Johnson in the room? Dave?
That's the Packers getting back at Rod for that little shot.
Well, let's make this a super discussion. I don't have to keep, queuing you guys up here. You're fantastic. So, Dave, why don't you start us off? Jump in where you guys see fit.
Okay, look, I think the roster is as good as it was last year, but they're not going to win as many games. I mean, obviously, they have essentially the same, group of people in place. Winning the Super Bowl, that's a tough ask, though, and that's nothing against the Lions. They're not saying they can't do it, but new coordinators on both sides of the ball, that's a big thing to overcome. There's still a lot of injury questions and concerns. I mean, Aiden should be back. Most people have seen the video by now of him running, and he looks great. Lee McNeil, you're probably looking at a mid-season return for him. Will, I think you mentioned it, Marcus Davenport. We'll see how many games he can last this year. So I think there's still some big questions about this team, but I certainly expect them to win the NFC North or be in the driver's seat for that at least, and then you get in the playoffs, you see what you can do.
I think they're the team that, I don't think it's going to start as hot as it's been. I think that they're, like Dave's saying, there's going to be some learning curves here, some adjustments made along the way. And plus, they're going to play a ton of games on the road in prime time. They're now a targeted team. So, I mean, that's one thing I would advise people, don't panic if that happens, because I do think at the end of the year, they are still going to be the team that you have to get rid of to win the thing. And I think that that's the most important. They're back-to-back division champions. They're the team that you're still going to have to go through to win it. And I think that that's the expectation is, like Dave's saying, to be in the driver's seat in your division. And if you're doing that, then everything else should take care of itself. Just be healthy enough at the end of the year this time, maybe.
One other thing on the road schedule, all those games are outdoors, too. If they're getting a lot of those late in the year and you're going to Chicago and you're going to Philadelphia and Washington, and the NFL is going to save some of those for those big TV windows late in the year. We all know, even though they went undefeated on the road last year, that's still a concern.
Will, I feel like the freak out after the Week 2 loss to Tampa in this town was so loud. We have to caution the fan base. There are going to be losses, and you're not going to love it, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a nice thought, Nick, but no one's going to heed your advice not to panic. There's no chance. And just to spell out this murderer's row of quarterbacks and teams they're facing, because we keep referencing it, this is who they're playing on the road next season. Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, Mahomes and the Chiefs, Lamar and the Ravens, Burrow and the Bengals, Stafford and the Rams, Daniels and the Commanders, and not to mention the 3 young quarterbacks in their division who are tall tasks to beat themselves. And I agree with you, Dave. This team might be record or better, but its record will likely be worse. Doesn't mean they can't win the NFC North, but an 11 or 12 win season feels much more realistic. We also haven't really mentioned they're replacing 2 really good coordinators, and there was undeniable synergy between Ben Johnson and the offense and between Aaron Glenn and the defense. And it's not to say they can't recapture that with 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏 and John Morton, but we should expect growing pains early on as those guys find their rhythm and their flow as play callers, and just the second time for Morton in that role and the first time for Shepard early in the season. So all to say, I think this team gets better and better as the year goes on, as they reintegrate some of those guys like Hutch, Mack, and others, and those coordinators find their flow. But I do think it will take some time, and it'll take some losses to get to where they want to go.
I think Ben was a star as an offensive coordinator, and I do think that's a big loss. Again, not something that the Lions can overcome, but his play sequencing, his play design, his willingness to, the aggressiveness he has. And again, Dan Campbell obviously put a lot of that in him. He's following Dan's desires in a lot of ways, but I think Ben was a star. So I do think that'll be a tall task for the Lions. And again, if I'm picking right now, I think this is an 11-win team, maybe a 12-win team. And let's not forget, the rest of the NFC North is playing essentially the same schedule.
Right.
Maybe not some of the crossover games and different home road splits, but essentially the same schedule. So they're not going to have an easy road either.
Nick, who makes a jump on this roster? When people go, is that Steve Grouse over there? DC Sports? Yeah, okay, cool. When people go into his shop to buy jerseys this season, who buy the holidays? Shout out, man. That's great, huh? Nice to see you. When they go start buying jerseys and gear halfway through the year, who makes the jump this year? Is it a Jack Campbell type? Who makes a jump and a leap that really sets this team apart?
I'm going to go with Terry Arnold. I think that the amount of stuff that he had to go through last year as a rookie corner, people don't really understand how much was put on him. And Terrian was one of the youngest players in the draft last year, too. And they put him in the slot and asked him to play man coverage all year long against guys that, a year ago, a year prior, he would have had no business hanging with. So I think he went through a ton, and if you look at his numbers outside of the penalties he had, they're very promising. So I think another year in the soup, and plus, You know, you get a guy like DJ Reed opposite him. I think that's going to be a great influence on him in general. I like 𝗣𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗏 a lot. I like the impact that he can have possibly on this defense. But Terrion, to me, I think by the end of next year, people will look at that and say, okay, now I get why they like them so much.
Will, give me a guy, give me a prediction for the team, and then we're going to get to lunch. Terry's behind the curtain. He's like, we got to eat. Oh, that's Steve. Hi, sorry.
Well, I'll show some more Boston College love. I think Christian Mahogany really shows himself this year, and I think they need him to, because his offensive line has to remain this team's strength. It's why this offense has been the best in the NFL, I'd argue, for the last 3 years, and they have a major hole to fill with Kevin Zeitler leaving. I thought Graham Glasgow's play declined as last year went on. If they can move Graham back to the right side where he's more comfortable and put Mahogany in at left, and Mahogany plays like an experienced, mauling, aggressive offensive lineman like he did in his 2 starts last year and in the playoffs, I think that goes a really long way toward keeping this offense as elite and explosive as it's been.
You want to do one more thing? Because now Steve's getting mad. The food's getting cold.
Sam Laporta, big year coming. He was hurt last year. 𝗣𝗲𝗲𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗏 playing for a bigger contract that he didn't get in free agency this year. I could see him putting up some good sack numbers, depending on who the Lions draft and what his role is.
I'm glad you raised your hand. Those are good. Dave Birkett, you can read his draft coverage and Lions coverage in the Free Press. Nick Baumgardner, you can do the same for his coverage in The Athletic. And Will Burchfield, you see him everywhere. You can read him on 97.1 The Ticket, see him on Fox 2. And Nick and I invite you to join us for our pre-draft special on Channel 7 Thursday night, 7 o'clock, leading right into the first round of the draft. Mr. Steve Gregorian.
You guys are amazing. Thank you. These guys are amazing. Just absolute experts. You were called experts backstage, and I was razzing you guys, but you were. So fantastic. And I was also thinking there's a lot of Sam Laporta love. Yeah. So do we start a Sam Laporta chant instead of Jared Goff? You remember that didn't go so well last year when we tried it with this group, but maybe next year. So give it up for these guys. One more round, please. Where's Terry Rhadigan? Thank you for your important role. Terry, you did an awesome job. All right, some more fun coming. We're going to spin the wheel. We've got 3 books to hand out to somebody in the audience. They're published by either Birkett or the Free Press. Amy's got everybody loaded. Go ahead and spin it, Amy. If you are the winner, you can stop on the way out to lunch and pick up your book.
It's a really good book, and there are pictures too for people that don't love reading in your life, right?
I'm not a great writer, but I can pick some pictures.
Good
out.
pictures.
Great Father's Day gift. If you want some, my daughter's out there selling some.
It is.
It's got a great cover too. It's just a very seductive book.
Family business out
They
there.
say you
I
can't
paid
judge
these
a book
guys
by
so
its
much
cover.
to say
I can
life.
judge that book by its cover.
Okay, so it's not popping up on the screen, but Mike Gates won and Guy Allen so far. I'm so sorry. This is technical
So
difficulties.
you want to spin it one more time? All right.
And the third one is, drum roll please,
Dave Birkett.
Michael Wooder.
Well, there you go. Thank you, Amy. Yes. All right. Pick up those books on your way out. The rest of you can stop and purchase a book on your way out before you go to lunch. You look like a hungry group, so join us for a strolling lunch in the ballroom. One last round of applause for this panel. One favor, tell your friends and colleagues to join the Detroit Economic Club. We have a lot of fun. So on time, every time, this meeting of the DEC is now adjourned. Go have fun.